100,000 years ago, someone gently laid a body in the earth. They folded its arms, they placed flowers. Then they covered it with care. That single act may be the oldest evidence that we became human. So what exactly did ancient humans do with their dead, and why? The answers are stranger and far more tender than you might expect. There's one mystery we'll come back to: a grave full of flowers. It changed everything we thought we knew about who buried our ancestors. Keep that grave in mind. We'll open it again before the end. Subscribe. There's a new story like this every few days. For most of our existence, death was constant and brutally close. People died young, from injury, infection, hunger, and the teeth of predators. A body left in the open didn't last long in the wild. Scavengers came. Decay set in. The smell drew danger to the living, so the earliest choice was practical. Move the dead away, fast. But somewhere along the way, that practical act became something deeper. Humans began to handle their dead with intention, not just disgust. And that shift is one of the great turning points of our species. The oldest deliberate burials we've found are stunningly ancient. At Kafse Cave in Israel, bodies were buried roughly 100,000 years ago. One child was laid down with deer antlers placed upon its chest. That's not survival, that's a gesture. That's meaning pressed into the soil. Someone decided this person deserved more than to simply vanish. Across the ancient world, a pattern emerges in how the dead were placed. Bodies were often curled tight, knees drawn to the chest. Some think it echoed sleep, others the position of an unborn child. A return, perhaps, to where we all began. It hints that early humans were already thinking about what comes after. Then there's the color red, which haunts ancient graves everywhere. Red ochre, a natural iron pigment, was sprinkled over countless bodies. From Europe to Australia, the dead were dusted in this blood-red powder. Why red? It's the color of blood, the color of life itself. Maybe they were trying to give the dead back what they'd lost. One of the most famous red burials is called the Red Lady of Paverland. Found in Wales, the bones were soaked in vivid red ochre. For years, people assumed it was a woman, hence the name. It was actually a young man, buried about 33,000 years ago. Beside him lay carved ivory and seashells, gifts for the journey. And that idea, gifts for the dead, appears again and again. Tools, beads, weapons, even food, placed beside the body. It suggests a belief that the journey wasn't over at death. That somewhere, somehow, the dead might still need these things. If this is blowing your mind, hit like. But burial wasn't the only way ancient people treated their dead. In some places, fire was the answer, the body given to flame. The oldest known cremation is over 40,000 years old in Australia. A woman now called Mungo Lady was burned, then her bones crushed. It was careful, deliberate. A ritual, not a disposal. Other cultures kept their dead remarkably close, sometimes inside the home. At Çatalhöyük in Turkey, the dead were buried beneath the floors. People slept on platforms right above their buried relatives. The living and the dead shared the same four walls. Death wasn't somewhere else, it was underfoot, every single night. And it goes further. Some peoples kept the skulls of loved ones. At Jericho, skulls were dug up and given new faces in plaster. They pressed clay into the bone and set seashells for eyes. These plastered faces sat in homes, watching over the living. It was a way to keep the dead present, almost alive. In Egypt, this desire to preserve the dead became an art form. Mummification tried to stop decay entirely, to make the body eternal. Organs were removed, the body dried with salt for 40 days, then wrapped in layers of linen and sealed in painted coffins. They believed the soul needed an intact body to live forever. But you don't need pyramids to find astonishing care for the dead. At Göbekli Tepe, people raised massive stone pillars before farming existed. Some believed this was a sacred site tied to death and the ancestors. 11,000 years ago, the dead may have shaped where we built. Our temples, our towns, perhaps born from honoring those we lost. Now, remember that grave full of flowers I promised you? It comes from Shanidar Cave in the mountains of Iraq, and the body inside wasn't one of us. It was a Neanderthal. For decades, soil around the grave was full of ancient flower pollen. It looked like flowers had been laid lovingly over a Neanderthal body. That suggested Neanderthals grieved and buried their dead with tenderness. It rewrote the image of them as brutish, unfeeling cavemen. Now, some scientists argue burrowing bees may have carried that pollen in. The flower grave is debated, but the burial itself seems real. Neanderthals did bury their dead. That much is hard to deny, and that means caring for the dead may be older than our species. It might be something we inherited, not something we invented. There's even an older mystery, deep in a South African cave system. A small-brained relative called Homo naledi may have placed bodies underground, in a chamber so remote it's hard to explain any other way. If true, the impulse to honor death is over 200,000 years deep. That's a thread running through almost the entire human story. From hidden cave chambers to flower graves to golden Egyptian tombs, the same quiet act repeated for thousands of generations. So why did we do it? Why not just walk away from the dead? Because to bury someone is to admit they mattered. It's to say you existed and your absence leaves a hole. That recognition of loss may be the seed of everything human. Art, religion, memory, all may begin with grief. Every culture since has built its own answer to the same question. What do we do with the people we can no longer hold? We bury, we burn, we wrap, we remember. We refuse to let go. And in doing so, we keep the dead alive in us. But not every culture wanted to keep the dead close. Some chose the opposite, to give the body back to the sky. In Tibet and Persia, the dead were left for birds. It was called sky burial, a return to the living world. Flesh became flight. Nothing wasted. The cycle simply continued. And in some places, the dead were never truly buried at all. Among certain peoples, bodies were kept, smoked, and carefully preserved. In Papua New Guinea, ancestors were dried above slow fires. Then placed on cliffs, watching over the valleys they once farmed, the dead weren't gone. They were still guardians of the land. Some cultures took an even stranger, more intimate path. They consumed their dead, a practice called endocannibalism. It wasn't cruelty. It was love, turned into a final act, to take the dead inside the body and keep them there. Grief, it seems, can wear almost any face we imagine. But how do we even know any of this was deliberate? Archaeologists read clues most of us would simply walk past. A body too neatly arranged to be an accident of nature. Pollen, pigment, and objects that simply shouldn't be there. Each tiny detail whispers the same word: intention. And those clues raise a question we can't quite answer. Did these people believe death was an ending or a door? The gifts, the ochre, the careful poses all point one way. They expected the journey to continue somewhere beyond the soil. That hope is perhaps the oldest story we've ever told. The next time you stand at a grave, remember this. You're performing a ritual 100,000 years old. The grief you feel was felt in firelit caves, long before words. It connects you to every human who ever lost someone they loved. Maybe that's what death really did. It taught us how to love. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. So, which of these two stories do you watch next? Pick the one that pulls you in and tap it now.